Alrighty. Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and we're doing another live stream. And it's going to be another coding live stream. I am calling upon stamina to get through some of the stuff that I'm trying to do. We've been hammering away at this graphics thing for weeks now, including some time off a stream, but I'm trying to do a lot of it on stream. Just because as long as I got to go on this journey, I might as well share it with people. And here's where we're at. I have a lovely cup of more regular style coffee. This is more pour over rather than the espresso. So I'm kind of getting a slower start. And if people remember what I was talking about on Tuesday, I went to a doctor appointment and got a super clean bill of health, and that's kind of exciting. I was very nervous about that because I was kind of like, oh man, I'm pushing so hard. It's bound to mean bad things for me. But nope, turns out my guess is that having a purpose for things kind of gives you mojo. And I'm doing a lot of stuff like exercising and I cook my own food, so I don't eat a lot of junk food or anything like that, with some exceptions. The doctor would like me to cut back on sugars and carbs and things. And it's like, okay, fair, we'll figure something out. Strangely, this includes rice. And that seems weird to me, although I believe it. But it seems weird to me because it's like, well, but rice isn't candy. But I guess it kind of is. So I'll figure out what I can do as far as my recipes for making various things and how I go about cooking them. And I know that I have the capacity to cut back on the rice that I put into stuff. And snacks are also something I am looking to revise. I have found that if I snack on ice cream too much, I will gain weight, and that's pretty understandable. If I snack on spready cheese and crackers, especially if the crackers for cheapness purposes are actually Tostitos mini rounds, because if you like crunchy cracker things and stuff, that's a really cheap way to get lots of them, but I will gain weight even more than with ice cream, weirdly. And while sitting in the doctor's office being told about this, I explained, I've been doing a thing recently where I take the little Tostito mini round, which is basically a corn cracker, and spread some cheese on it, and then lately I'm putting a single pepperoni on top of that. So it's a little bit more protein, fat, and stuff. The doctor that I'm seeing is like, oh, you want healthy fats, things like, almonds and stuff, but it's the carbs that are not going to help you. And I went, wait a minute. Couldn't I just take a slice of pepperoni and spread some cheese on it and eat that? And she's like, oh, kind of how very clever you are. Why, that would work. Goodness, yes. And so I went, well, I'll try it. And the doctor's like, well, we don't want to stampede you into swearing that you're going to do a bunch of things that aren't going to stick and so on. Because I have also talked to this doctor about how, I'm a recovering addict and I need my dealing with drugs and things is something that I need to not do. And more than that, if I'm in a situation where I'm having an operation or something, I basically have to turn it over to the doctor and go, okay, figure out what I need to do, tell me what to do, and I will do it. And only as much as you tell me what to do. So I'm not as a recovering addict, I am not the take as needed guy, because it's like, oh, as needed? That's literally all the time. So yeah, I'm trying to use my mind to figure out stuff to continue to improve my health going forwards. And it's very cool that I've gotten to the point, like without cutting out any of these things yet, without these latest adjustments I'm thinking about, where like my cholesterol is even better than usual, my blood pressure is fine in spite of all the coffee, all of that stuff is sort of hanging together. And it's like, that's cool. I must be doing something right. And speaking of doing something right, I want to show you something here. I can build what I've got here and go into Gain Artifacts. I don't think this is going to be the day for working out how to move this stuff around and build it on GitHub and let people have the results, but we're going to work on a bunch of the stuff that I've been working on before. The persistence thing that I was talking about. So I've just placed that, and check this out. Knobs, including the curvy knobs, but look, they're in mostly the right place, kind of, sort of. Not completely. Like if I do this, I start losing them. The one in the very end is more or less perfectly positioned no matter what, but this one needs to scooch up a bit. And then apart from that, and this might actually be the day where I split this into two different projects, because one of them needs to be this full-size meter, the Airwindows meter. That might be the first juice-oriented thing that you see, even though it won't have like all of this wackiness yet. The meter that's just the meter is probably going to appear as just a panel. You open it, it's just a panel, there are no controls, and you are seeing what the audio is doing. The simplification of that suits my simple purposes. But all the rest of this stuff, like, hey, I want to make one where you've got multiple, all these different sliders, and they're lined up like this, and then you've got a possibly doesn't need to be as aggressively spotlit as this, but then you've got text in here, and you resize your window to ridiculous extremes and it still hangs together, is more or less the main intention here. And the idea is to come up with a design where we're starting out at essentially a layout kind of like this. And then there's a panel going from one side to the other, kind of like what we see here. And this is 3 panels, so there will be just one panel, and it will apply itself to whatever the purpose of the plugin is. Whether it is showing things like, in our, like what I've got currently, right? We can get this going. Not interested in the sound. So the kinds of readout that I can put on a chart like this, firstly, I will want to deal with the size of it so that it'll be like a moving thing like this, but it won't need to be the full size of the screen. I'm thinking more of a smaller window that will just cycle as fast as this, but I will want to scale it down so that the width is closer to a 1 pixel width. Remembering, of course, that we can squish things vertically if needed, and that will make that smaller and technically harder to read, but I mean, if you want to make your screen this big, you can expect that you won't be able to read it. So it's going to go in the direction of having 2 plugins under development. And one of them, I can also see an issue with cutoff here, which is that this is showing up a little bit higher than it's meant to, but there's always something, right? There's always something. So we'll need to have it in a layout where it's like a sort of vertical panel, kind of like, but not necessarily exactly like, a recording console's channel strip. But since it's not a physical object, it doesn't technically have to literally be a channel strip. And I can make it so that we've got some of these guys on the top panel, and then below that, the display, and then either you could have display to the side and a primary control that was a big old knob for the main purpose of the thing. Or you can just have the display, which isn't necessarily as tall as this, and then other things on the flat facing you panel would be additional knobs of various sizes pointing at you, and then on the very bottom edge could be some extra stuff like this, where it visually recesses into the plugin space. Because the idea behind having some of them be tilted like this, and it doesn't look right the way I've got it set up, I wonder whether it would be worth fussing. Well, there are many things to do, as you might well imagine. One of them is coming up with because you see the way this is laid out, like top and bottom and so on, I could have the top panel have typically used controls like everybody loves an input trim, everybody loves an output trim. I can make those things be not applied to the audio path if they don't have to be. I know how to do if the trim is not literally 1, then apply the result. So I can have stuff that doesn't always get used and put into the audio path. But people will often ask for stuff like, can I have a dry wet control? Can I have an input trim? Can I have an output trim? And a top panel above the meter feels to me like a very appropriate place to put a little bank of controls that are relevant to pretty much every plugin. Like you always go there for finding a dry wet on top of things. You always go there for an input or output trim above and beyond what's used in the regular plugin. And the main panel will be the stuff that you actually work with. And then a bottom panel looking kind of like this, however, noting that I do still have a adjustment to make. This white area is being drawn too high up. And I don't know whether the maybe that is the same white area and both of these are being drawn slightly off. Because if we make it be dark, well, no, hang on. So one thing at a time, though. I'm going to try to talk my way through all of this. I've got my fire going, although it's going through wood at a really good rate, but it's not actually very cold here at the moment. So the main point I was making is the stuff that I was working on Tuesday that it didn't quite get finished, I got closer, and here's the code that did it. I have this thing where it's pad height. You'll notice that I've drifted away from the golden ratio stuff I was doing. I can do another quick experiment by drifting the other direction. Because it turns out get height minus get width times scale height is giving me roughly the right thing, but it's not taking into account tilt. So what I'll do is try to talk through this a little bit, and we're just going to dig into this stuff, see how things roll as I get rolling with today's coding and streaming. I was doing my usual reading Reddit for things, and there was, let's see now, So as I do this, the resonance control is still perfect. Cutoff is not bad. That's kind of a similar thing to what I was doing before. And the gain control. So I'm wondering what I can do to interact with this. Because I've got this set of controls. There's any number of other controls that I might also want to try to do. But we're just hammering away at everything that's the first and loudest. You'll also notice this bright red line, and that's because I'm thinking in terms of drawing some shading on the overall plugin itself. So I came up with a way of drawing a stripe on simply the backdrop, which I don't think I can actually make it. I can't make any of these controls overlap that line, but it would be drawn on the background, so these would overlap the line. If it was drawn across these, it would draw these shades of gray relative to whatever the background color is. For instance, if the background color was this, the shades of gray would work with the background color, but then the line that you draw, well, actually, that's an experiment that I could literally try right now. I see no reason why I shouldn't kind of dive into this and just get extremely experimental. So let's see, starting at 0.75, so to make this line be in a different place, what I need to do, and I've developed, the line width is not dissimilar to what I'm doing with drawing the knobs. And let's make those floats while we're at it, because they're going to have to be something. This is actually working entirely with ints. Is ambiguous? Why is that ambiguous? Why would you call that ambiguous? Well, I know one thing I can do is, oops. Always got to say oops many times. Let's see if that stopped it being ambiguous. It did. What we're doing is we're saying, actually, this is definitely an int, so don't make it be a float. Because apparently I could do floats for all of these, or I could do ints for all of these, but I can't do both at the same time. Or if I did, I don't know what would happen. So in theory, we have now moved the line up just to see what it does. I feel like in some ways this live streaming of the coding thing, I'm reminded of the guy that I saw on Reddit. There was a guy that posted to a game dev subreddit just today. Oop, and look at that. It's actually not drawing a thin line at all, is it? Well, however, we are still seeing that if we pick some kind of funny color, it is, oh, that's interesting. Then some of our shading, and the thumb is being told to be the background color, but that is only a single color, so it's limiting what the thumb can do. That said, it's based on the background color, and so we can see where the thumb is peeking through to that red part there. And we can even see that the part that I'm really wondering about here is to what extent, yeah, see, like this gradient, this is semi-transparent. You can see through this a little bit. And that should be the case for the whole gradient. It's just a matter of what color I chose and whether I chose it to be a semi-transparent black, I'm also noticing that this goes from white to transparent, so it is showing a darker color here, and then the medium gray here is not the same as the medium gray here. So what I'm wondering, and I bet I know why that is too. I've got a full gradient going from purely white to purely black on just the outside extreme. And then these inner colors, at least to some extent, are going from a transparent black, which lets light through, to the color specified in the background. Like, check it out. If I go to a much more intense blue, what's going to happen is these grays are going to turn into more intensely blues because I'm telling it not just be transparent. I'm telling it be this color, not any other color. And there you go. So there is a gradient in here that's just white to black with a transparency in between. But then there's also gradients that are calling upon the underlying color, so it looks more transparent when that color is there in the background, but when we've overridden the color, we get this. That's all well and good, but one of the things I was trying to do was, oh wait, I bet I know. I think what I was doing when I did this fill rect was, I was drawing it starting at the position specified here, and I thought I was just drawing it at the width. I thought I was drawing it from this point to this point, but instead I was drawing it from this point and making it this tall, which is not what I want. So instead we're going to do this. Line width. Now, that's going to change it to be what I wanted, and that makes the rest of the code here a little easier to deal with. Not in a significant way, because it's all relatively easy to deal with, but now it's going to draw the red stripe. And it has. And we can see that some of this stuff is being drawn on top of the stripe, and you can see where it peeks through in the transparency. And you can see where it doesn't. Like, my whole center area here is parts of gradients being handled in a certain way. That's also why they poke out from time to time. And then this is being literally drawn on top of the line. These are the ones that are semi-transparent, and this is all basically doing what I had in mind. So what I can do now is some of the things I was planning, as long as I'm here doing this, we're going to draw some rects. And this is 0 get height minus line width. As long as I'm not multiplying it by anything, I shouldn't have to do that. I'm reading the chat. I got the chat right where I can see it. I like to do that when I live stream. And you're quite welcome. I do that stuff because it's what interests me. There's a number of things that are interesting me at the moment, and it is pleasing to charge through and try to do all of them. This GUI code stuff, well, that's actually, it's a little challenging, but there's nothing so wrong with that. So let's see, if we make all of these the same, that is a place I can start. here's another thing that I can do. Some of these are going to be vertical and some of them are going to be horizontal. So if I repeat this pattern, now I've made 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines. They're just not in appropriate places. Yeah, in digital, brightness is definitely very difficult. For years, I was mostly just working on making digital more dull, softening it up. And some of the recent stuff is even more effective at that, but it's always been interesting to me to try to find where, because the whole thing with brightness in digital is that it will do an entire mix without touching the brightness of anything. There's no softness in it at all, anywhere. You lose nothing. But in air, you lose brightness. If you stand across the room and make a noise, and somebody is listening from across the room, they're not hearing the direct noise that you made, even over like 10 or 20 feet. Air will attenuate highs. So when you're doing digital mixing without doing anything, compressible with the highs, you're producing a result that has no flexibility and no realism. And there's your problem. So now let's see what we've got here. We're going to want to do a couple of different colors, so let's immediately build that into the concept. These are eventually going to become transparent or semi-transparent colors, and then there will be a nice little bevel effect. I don't need it to be too exaggerated, I just want a little hint at it. I also might possibly want a black line around everything, but I'm not entirely sure. So and like I said, I know I don't have it yet. I haven't done all the things. I'm drawing 4 lines, but they're not in appropriate places. So this part's correct. This part's not. So a cross position of a cross at 0 and a height that's the full width and a height that is starting at 0. That'll give me a line across the top edge of what this is, because we're drawing from get local bounds, which is area. And it does in fact look like I'm drawing a hairline around everything. This is still adjustable, but it does look like I'm drawing a neat 1 pixel line around it all. And here's where I'm setting the size of my pen, and we're doing a cube root thing, which I can move to here. In fact, I can also, well, no, hang on. I don't want to build that into this because this is after that is after, because I want the full width or the full height, whichever is larger. And then that's going to be how big the bevel is. And they don't scale according to whether it's really wide or narrow, but it does scale relative to how big it is. The outline does not. That 1 pixel outline is just there. But the rest of this, we're going to do like red for one and green for the other. And we're going to see what we can make happen. This should be like starting at the top corner. So actually, I know that all of this needs to be starting at the top corner for part of it. That's making both of those lines start at the top corner but go off. Then the other lines start at the bottom corner, meaning that, well, hang on. I think we still start some of these rects at 0 because it's not being drawn reverse into it. So the one that is get width, we started at, let's see, get width, line width, 0, 0, get width, line width. So 0, 0, get height minus line 1. So we're starting this at the left edge, but down to where only line width is letting it fill in a space. It's a different color now. And then the one from height needs to be all the way across. Let's see how well all this works. The idea is to see how well all of this works. So if I'm drawing one where one of the parameters is never 0. Let's see what we got. Also, I don't, well, hang on a second. Okay, so this one that is at the bottom edge, this all is correct. And height minus line width means that I have the bottom edge. This one gets drawn from the right edge. But it starts at vertical 0. See, it's horizontal, then it's vertical. And so at 0, get width, height, 0, get height. And now we're going to see whether I got all of that right. This is very primitive. I'm only talking through it. I'm reminded of the guy on Reddit. He had been trying to go to school, and he was trying to learn C++, which is pretty much what I'm doing, right? And he's like 19. And we're struggling terribly with it, and then tried to cheat using ChatGPT, which is definitely not in the right direction. And then he's on the verge of dropping out and going, can I ever be a game programmer? Because I'm failing out of school for computer programming. And so I jumped in to kind of try to help him and give some timely advice. And hey, check it out. The green is not the most vivid green in the world, but it's working. And we have a red edge, and it handles even like negative sized scrolling. But you can see a green color down here and over to the side. Mind you, this is drawing over the black line that I drew, and I maybe don't like that. So let's see what we can do about that. I can tell you one thing I can do about that right away, and that's draw the hairline in black later. That's probably easier than doing the extra calculations, because it shouldn't take much to get this done. Let's make it be blue instead, in hopes that it's a little bit more vivid. And now we're drawing the final color, this rect that is exactly the outside edge. And let's see what we get. And yeah, the reason I'm doing this, and the sheer dumbness of what I'm doing, is starting to stress me out a little bit. I'm talking through this as if I'm doing grand feats of learning new things, but the stuff that I'm dealing with is the dumbest stuff imaginable. And yet I don't actually care, because the point being, like, I can design it and make it do this thing. Well, we seem to have lost the red and blue beyond a certain point, but it's a very small point, so I'm thinking that's fine. And we're drawing our bevel, which will end up becoming a either an inset or an emboss. And then we're drawing a hairline in black. And if we make it giant, we can make it sort of like, I can see this line scaling up as I drag this like right off the edge of the screen. Let's scooch it over here. It's still streaming, but it's like this far. I can scale it like this much. And that relates to, which is also what I would want to do for this inset, like the way that we have this boundary around this, and the boundary is now taking up lots of space. I'm going to want the whole thing to scale, not just the inset. And that I think is very doable. But my point being, I was able to come up with this this line size, this kind of stuff going on, and walk through it without looking up ChatGPT or whatever, because what if I was trying to do something that didn't actually exist? If I try to do something that doesn't actually exist, ChatGPT is not going to help me, because there won't be an answer. It will not have seen an answer because nobody has done the thing. That's rare. Usually people have done the thing. But those are the ones that are really valuable. Also, I still see the chat, and I'm not sure which producer you're talking about, but I believe it. That said, use of those frequencies is always going to make something sound ultra close. Even if they're present, it's sending audio cues telling you the sonic event that's happening is like right up in your face. And that's not always what you want to do. Like if you're doing a space ambient mix, there's a bunch of noises that you don't want to have any content like that, because the distant noises in space are not right up in your face. That's kind of the point. Your reverb should not be throwing 20K information right up in your face, no matter what's in it, because that's not what reverb sounds like. Reverb sounds like air traversing through space. And yeah, MP3s will have brick wall filters, partly because they're reconstructed from a limited number of spots, but partly because if you tried to include the super high frequency information in an MP3, it eats up all of the data used for making the MP3, and it ends up sounding like butt, because you're losing like resolution on the mid-range by deciding to try to include all the super high stuff. And so MP3s will typically just throw away that information. It'll typically just abandon it, be like, nope, don't care about that. And it's because it's a compensation. It's not that there's no purpose to encoding that stuff. It takes so much data to do it that you don't get to have good mid-range. And that's how that works. So let's get back to this. Let's move some of these things around and duplicate some of these things. We can use some of this information twice. Like, check this out. So here's our fill all. Resizable window background color ID is the base color that we're using. But we can copy this very information into right here. And then If we want, we can make it be line width plus 1, line width plus 1. So now if we built this, what we were looking at before, we're still going to have the vivid red and black. One thing I could do in some of that is cool out my rect fills in a specific way. The corners where they transition from the one to the other don't actually need to be full intensity. What do I mean by that? Well, let me show you. Another challenge of doing this kind of stuff is that as I'm talking about these things, it might be really primitive things like drawing a rect on the screen. This is drawing a rect on the screen, but now you will notice that it goes right up to this and straight up makes it perfectly match. And you can still see our controls even when they are microscopic. Like this is a microscopic thing, but you can still kind of read cutoff there and operate the control, believe it or not. And you can kind of still see the meter there. This is, it designed properly, this makes it possible to make the interface size be giant and still look cool, or be unreasonably small and still usable, which could be, people might find that handy in certain mixed circumstances. You can see that the color picker control is not following the rules and is useless, shrunk down to too small. These knobs are not being drawn very nicely, but it is so very much too small that I don't honestly care. It's still possible to fiddle with this until it'll behave a little bit better. That's one of the things we're doing, but in a way, I kind of am fine with, like this one, it's drawn inappropriately, but you can still see what it's doing, even when you set it to the bottom edge. Hey, Jonathan. And they still look kind of like they're supposed to a little bit. And you can still read the text a little tiny bit. And we've got that bevel, which is highlighting the control. So what I'm wondering now is whether I might want to add that to this. And what that's going to do is add another level of bevel, so that there will be, if I don't change it, there will be a blue line at the bottom here and an additional thickness of red line up here. And if I don't change that, then I can add that additional behavior. So while we're at it, let's see what we've got. That's going to go into Airwindows UI. That's going to go into here, but not draw rotary slider. I've moved all of the stuff into Airwindows meter. So what we're going to do is go and find some of this stuff. And probably, let's see, how are we drawing things? Fill rect. Okay. I'm pretty sure I can do the same thing. This float count dx and so on and so forth. G is the graphics context. If I'm not mistaken, what we're doing here is, oh, well, we've got get local bounds. I don't know if I can do G reduce. Oh, hang on though. Hang on though. I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So, we know this does something because this is changing the size of these. And we're doing this stuff here. This is doing this. But here's where we draw paint. And we're drawing this stuff based on fill rack to 0, 0, and so on and so forth. So if we do this, then what happens? We've got a line width. Is this going to draw these bevels inside the scope of everything? Because we know we can do this here. But these are relative to area, whereas in Airwindows UI, we're just referring to raw numbers rather than stuff that's relative to area. But here we're doing raw numbers rather than stuff that's relative to area. Let's see what happens. Can we do get local bounds, reduce it by 20, and have whatever is drawn in here? And again, over to Airwindows UI. If I did, oh, well, hang on, we're not actually making, let's, do I have get local bounds here? No, local bounds is being fed in to this, so that one doesn't follow the same rules, but this is where we're doing it here. So if we then add it to this, we will have a get local bounds, and then, oh, reduce that by another 20. Now, if we're able to do this and make it work, that means we get to scale everything around sort of arbitrarily, but it makes it harder to work out what the exact pixel sizes are in a way that I'll have to work around. But it'll make it way easier to do the bevels I'm looking to do. So let's see what we've got now. We should have those. Oh, hi, are you opening the plugin? No? Didn't double click properly. The blue lines and the red lines might be drawn inside the window, and the meter might be drawn even more inside the window. They are not, but they're kind of, huh? Interesting. You can see that I have put a sharp limit on this bound where this bevel is being drawn, but this is not actually affecting the drawing of the meter part at all. It's still filling in at purely white. And that suggests it's going to be harder to draw a bounds inside the actual meter. That said, nothing's impossible, but only the bevel observed the changing of the bounds, and only in one direction. It did not set this one in the other way. So that's a bunch of stuff that didn't work the way I wanted. Area, get local bounds, and reduce didn't work inside Airwindows meter. None of this is actually caring about what the bounds of the area. It's like it doesn't even know what the bounds of the area is. It's just getting a graphics context. That said, resized is setting the bounds of the meter. So if we, and we are in fact setting it this way. So we're not going to attempt to change the meter's bounds. I'm not sure I can do that from inside the meter either. But we're going to continue fooling with this. Area, reduce. it's not actually reducing it. Hang on a second. I got a little wood stove fussing to do. It's a rainy day. It's a rainy day. It shouldn't be cold, but it's going to be just cold enough that I don't want to be distracted by getting cold. It's going to be interesting when it's the summer and the challenge is everything getting hot. That said, my lighting is LED lighting. It's not all that hot. One thing you might have to deal with, however, is a fan elsewhere in the room. Hopefully it won't be too loud. Got a variety of things that I can do for when it gets really hot. And we'll see how it all works out, but that's not today. That's not today. Hey, if I do reduce just 20, is that a thing? Or is it going to complain? Oh, it expected 2, did it? If it expected 2, and I give it 4, is it now going to reduce from all the directions? Nope. Nope. It only wants... Okay, so... So that's interesting. We can reduce area. Oh, wait, hang on. I'm trying to think this out. James, nope. Nope, although I was supporting the developer of iPlug2 to some extent when he was doing a Patreon, before he told people to leave the Patreon, which, if I remember correctly, is the thing he did. So as we do this area reduce, it only reduces from the furthest extremes. Unlike in resized, it's not capable of stepping stuff inwards. And that feels weird. And yet, I believe that is the truth of it. So I think what this tells me is I don't get to do this the way I was thinking of. Hopefully as I keep slogging away through, I mean, it is not even 10 yet, so this is my first hour, so that's not that terrible. As I keep slogging my way through this stuff, hopefully the little neurons will link together and I'll drink more cups of coffee, switching over to the espresso that I like, and I'll start being able to do less ruthlessly dumb things. But I gotta start with doing the ruthlessly dumb things because it's gonna be an 8-hour stretch of programming and I gotta start somewhere. If I don't see where some of this stuff goes together, like I did area reduce and I thought it was going to do what it did in resized. Resized insets everything. And then all the bounds are within what resize did. So here I can do area reduce by 2020. Or indeed 200 by 200. But here I can't. We'll do a smaller one because that's not the same area. So as I've exaggerated this, and I'm not actually using line width appropriately anymore, what's going to happen from doing that, including it's reducing by integer amounts, and it's not caring about the window size that way. So large windows will function, and small windows will squinch all of the controls out of existence. And we get this. So reduce in the other one is just taking it up to the edge, but it's not actually, the 200 and 100 is making the internal position. The reduce is working in both directions. But the one where we draw the bevels, the one where we just draw the background of the screen, cannot reduce into the space surrounding it. And I guess I know why that would be. We're not defining a thing in here and then reducing that. So this paint context is tied to 0, 0. Now, what would it do if it wasn't? We got get local bounds. If this fill rect was inside some other bounds, and I reduced that, okay, so that is now a, oh, well, hang on. I have a couple of more changes to make here. There. So now we have the bounds of the whole entire thing, and we're calculating line width based on that. But then we're making another area that is not that. It just happens to have the same values. Now if we make this, this is probably going to reduce by 100 on each side. But let's find out. Let's find out, because we're no longer painting in a graphics context. We're painting in something that has been defined by a area. And I'm not entirely, like, we got area get local bounds, but I'm not really sure what that object is supposed to be called. I just know that it's something, and auto is stopping me from needing to know whether it's like juice : conceptual area inside which you draw things. So this is hiding some of my information. I do wonder whether I could optimize some of this by like finding out what those variables actually are and leaving out all the auto. But for right now, I want to see what happens when I build this, because I've now done area reduce, but instead of being literally just the graphics context, I believe I have made another context, much like these meter, gain knob, etc. are themselves objects with their own context. Have I successfully made another object and then scaled that in such a way that it scales in from all sides, like the position being fed into resized? One way to find out. And that'd be a nope. That'd be a nope, Captain. So what this means is that the this area that's part of resized, if you scale it in, it's going to become inside from all angles, but anything in paint, you can't resize the context you feed into paint. It just goes from the corner there. It just scales from here, smaller, but it won't scale in this way, which I believe is, since that is paint, right? So I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case for Airwindows meters paint as well. And that's a little frustrating. But I can use it as an object inside itself, and there's nothing so wrong with that. So let's just have it be its own little object. How about? We are just trying to solve some of these problems. Here's what we do to roll that back. Or maybe I don't want to. Meh. Let's... refactor, rename. Only within that one context. That's cool. That's how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to do all of them everywhere. And that is a way of saying, hey, this is not something that you can resize. You can't do global reduce and have it act appropriately. So we're calling that calculation global simply because if you scale it with reduce, it doesn't go from all directions. On the other hand, when I have area reduce does go from all directions. So what we've got here, let's return some of this to its original form. I'm now speculating on whether I want to draw bevels. Ooh, if this works, give me a second. I can do some of this regardless if my calculations are correct. Let's go back over to here. And let's take I don't know, some of this. Let's take this stuff. That should be fairly generic code, meaning it's probably going to work on this. Let's see, done with peak, 0 slew cost. Here's the array, here's drawing the stuff on the array. So that goes to here. Now let's see, where do we have references to like area? Oh, I can take some of this other stuff too. Let's see. What else can we take? Here's our global and line width. It is a factor of may not need this bit. Here we are up at the top. We've got get width and we've got get height. If we had this, oh, we need to readjust that. We're capable of calling these directly. And then we get rid of that. And we get to call these directly. And that means now we have a line width inside this calculation, which is scaled to the size of this control. We could keep fooling with it, but this gives us that number. And then dx and dy, that's also a thing. So now we've got a control called line width, and we also have access to refer to get width and get height, and it's going to talk about the overall size of the thing. So that's what we've got. Although we are assuming things about the overall size. Like this stuff is drawn expecting that the canvas is going to be 600. So it's going to be 1200 wide and 600 tall. This is subject to further improvement, but for the big one, it's going to be this. Let's see what happens when we start simplifying these and having them refer to just this object. Get width from inside something like this is going to give me just that object. And we're still doing it in red and blue, but that's not necessarily going to be the final result. What I'm thinking of here is if this is able to draw, let's find out. We have drawn our entire thing, and then we're drawing these over the top of everything. We could even steal the hairline. We've got a number of things that refer to hairlines, and so let's use this one. This is all leading to something. Ideally, it's a pleasing and subtle something, but it's all leading to something. So with this, we are drawing a black hairline around literally everything. And on low-resolution screens, it's not going to be as good of a hairline, but that's what it's meant to be. And let's see what we've got. We should now have multiple bevels. The bevels are just being drawn in red and blue. The point is to get to where the bevels are being drawn in transparencies. And to find out what it does. We can probably also change the fill, but that's another story. Not there yet. Here we are. Boop. Will you look at that? We've now got multiple bevels on all of our things, and they scale appropriately, which is making our control scale kind of like this. And some of it is not actually, the hairline is not appropriate if it's meant to be part of the overall bevel. But then at the same time, the bevel colors aren't appropriate if they're being drawn over, I don't know, say dark gray versus white. So that's going to give different results, and so I'm going to want to deal with that. But we are successfully drawing the bevels, and that seems useful. The question is, would we want to, I don't know, make this closer to what it's meant to eventually be? Let's fool with it and find out. So meter set bounds. Here's our width, here's our height. So start x and y, size x and y. Size x and y is 0.75. So if I can keep it to be the same size but make it be a little bit more squished, it's all very flexible anyway. And that will take it off of the top a bit. Also, while we're at it, let's just fool with some of this more appropriately. What do I mean by appropriately? Well, we'll see. I'm just playing at this point. I just want to see what could be made to happen. So if I had two 0.25 height things, and this is a 0.50, and it starts at 0.25 down, it is full width. This is still full width. And then my gain and cutoff are, here's where we set tilt. So let's see, I think that tilt white is vertical. So this one's straight, this one's .5. This one's also 0.5, but this one starts at 0.75, and this one starts at 0.0. Thing is, I'm going to need to reverse the colors, I think. Because I think yeah. So now it might start looking more like what's supposed to be happening. It's the first time I've done this particular trick, but we'll see. It's always this morass of talking basic nonsense while I try to do things. Here's the thing. So as we squish it, we're cutting down the size of this, but there's no other way to deal with it because this is setting a limited scaling. That said, here we have a set of bevels and 3D styled controls. This one's on a flat plane and it fits neatly within the area of these bevels. This looks like it is over the top of the screen, and this looks like it is underneath, and we are looking in through an angled thing at a meter which is behind all of this stuff. We could also position the meter to take up half of that space and sit the gain knob. So start X and Y and size X and Y. There's our meter. So that's 0.5 and 0.5. And then the gain knob is also 0.5 and 0.5 because it's in the middle of the screen. But the start X and Y are different. Start Y, 0.25 is correct. Same for the gain knob, 0.25 is correct. But the gain knob needs to be started at 0.0 and the meter needs to be started at 0.5. Now we're going to have another arrangement. I can already see that I'm going to need to scale all of this up to make templates where I have just enormous numbers of possible parameters, because the ability to fit them all in a visually pleasing way is going to go way up relative to other arrangements. But we've got something which can be scaled and moved, and it's kind of, the meter is, I think, better at full width, because it's not really, the meter is completely malleable, so we don't really need to worry about that, but the positioning of the knobs is the part that interests me at the moment. And I can set it up so that the knobs are, in fact, following the same rules. So, gain knob 0.25, cutoff knob starting at 0, and resonance knob starting at 0. And then bounds are going to be somewhat different because size X and Y placement, we can have a rectangular shape for a tilted knob. So the bounds for cutoff and resonance knob are now twice as wide as they are high. And they're lined up vertically with gain knob, which doesn't make sense, but whatever. I'm just playing with the positioning right now. So now we have a meter on the side and knobs positioned vertically so that more of them fit into the space. You can just kind of adjust it as you see fit. If you want tall and skinny, well, you can make tall and skinny happen. If you want wider, like in theory, it could conceivably be good to keep the same aspect ratio, just to let it all be designed correctly, but I don't have to. I can have it sort of reposition things as they need to be positioned. The question is just whether that is a unpleasing effect or not, but this is the idea behind having this stuff work like this is that we've got a fairly consistent. One thing I do note, however, I'm not completely thrilled with the relative sizes of the letters, although it does make it look as if it falls back to this position where these letters are drawn. And then this bottom edge does look like it's closer. That said, it's not perfect. I'm going to take a moment and poke around on the internet. I'm speculating on whether I need to do more with my wood stove. Give me a second. I'm going to guess that might be a yes. But I'm also curious as to whether we can design this so that it can be scalable but keeps an aspect ratio, because one of the things about this is that I'm able to make it work at multiple aspect ratios, and some of these designs are really designed to function with that, but I can't say that it's pleasing. Like, it's all well and good, that's nice, but I can't say that it's necessarily that pleasing to have the aspect ratio be this malleable. It's kind of like it's just me showing off without producing a pleasing result. So I'm going to fire up a web browser window. And see what people say when they talk about juice resize aspect ratio. Because you realize the thing about this is people do that stuff like go and ask ChatGPT, and all they're doing is basically like this. So here we have multiple people talking about this stuff. (2014). Here's somebody with the issue. 2020. I'm looking for recent stuff. Here's somebody dealing with a problem similar to that. There's apparently something that makes it work. Maybe some of it has to do with making standalone applications. Because if it's that, then that's not as much of a problem for me, because I'm willing to let go of some of these things. Here's 2021. Again, a standalone. Here we have resizable. And we have a ability to set a limitation which might be relevant to what we're doing. Let's just take that, that's juice code, and see what happens if in plugin editor, where it says set resizable, can we set it to be a fixed aspect ratio? Firstly, what is our aspect ratio? Set size. Okay, that's easily figured out. I just got to bust out my calculator, and it's going to be relative to 1220 820. And even that is somewhat, that's not what we're going to end up with, but or maybe I can, we want to set that there. We can probably call getConstrainer down here. Let's try that. I meant to cut that, not simply copy it. We're good. So I don't want 1.3, but let's see. Let's assume that 1.3 meant that it was something similar to this. We're starting at it basically closer to 1.4, but we should be able to simply do that. However, I think I will want to cast those to floating point just because it seems to me like it's going to want it to be floating point. I can see that they're the same numbers, so I should be able to live with that. And I don't really think I need to define variables just to do it. But that should set an aspect ratio that will stick with where we're at. If that works, I'll put some of these other things back again, and we'll continue to play. If not, we'll do something else. Also, if anybody has strong feelings about how stuff should be resizable with any aspect ratio you want, let me know. I'm not sure that's going to be a necessary constraint. I'm also not worried if it doesn't work properly with, see, we've got the ability to make stuff like this. We have a giant plugin, which we're probably not going to want to have as big as that, but we can design some of these things appropriately. We've got our color picker. And now we have a aspect ratio resizer that is not actually doing the thing it said it was going to, is it? Or is it? Oh, interesting. Okay, so if we click on this, it's okay. If we get it to do this, then it is no longer okay. What happens when we fiddle with this like that? Does it jump back just from touching this? I think I have probably got, I think these arrows are part of juice, and I'm telling it somewhere that it's okay to do the resizing, not as a, and I do have a tendency, if it swoops over here, it disappears, and that is because we're not able to squish it any longer. Like, to resize it, you got to be on that diagonal path. If you swoop beyond the diagonal path, it will vanish. And then what happens? Let's let it resize to this size. What do we got? Okay, that's potentially bad. There is another thing that helps you fix that, though. And it was in the web page I was looking at, too. Said resize limits. I do not know what these numbers are supposed to be. Let's go look this up. Jump to definition. Min height, min width, max width, max height. Somewhere I'm going to need to tell it that you can't have the additional resizer. But we got mid width, max width, max height. So there's a limitation that I can include. No maximum size. You can scale it up to be unreasonably large. You won't, but you could. I don't see a purpose for having a maximum size. That feels like that's just going to bite you when they start inventing incredibly microscopic pixels. But let's see now. So, set, true. What do these two truths mean? One of them is probably going to mean you can resize it in a non-constrained way. Allow host to resize and use bottom right corner resizer. Huh. Well, is the horizontal arrow that I was seeing host resizing? So resizable corner, but do not allow host to resize. If I do this, what then happens to my funky little plugin? I'm probably going to make some of these designed around starting out at like half size or whatever, so you'll be able to scale them up to a double size. That is where it might start to make sense of having a maximum size constraint. If you're doing something like a meter where you're defaulting to 50%, so it'll look kind of nice and clean, but then would you want to be able to stretch it beyond the size it can go? In any case, here we are. Here's our resizer. And we can still do this, but it doesn't want me to. And then if we use the corner, it will keep exactly the same layout the whole way. So here's now what I'm wondering. I do also have it set up in a useful way right now. Maybe before going back and doing more, it's time to address some of these graphical glitches. Because I do have some graphical glitches, and I believe that the positioning of this stuff, although I probably should take away the aspect ratio stuff to work on this better. Oh, and I did not test the final thing. When I say the final thing, what I mean is Huh. Well, hang on a second. This is granted a bit of an assumption, but let's see if it actually works too. Because right now what we're looking at, what I'm looking at is my damn wood stove. Always getting distracted by that stuff. What we're looking at is the resize limits. Because we have just told it, by the way, don't let the host resize you. And yet the horizontal resize still worked, and it still gave me a special control just for resizing it, even though I told it host could not resize. So that then is a meaningless observation. We don't actually care. I do have limits though, so what if we told it that the new limits are also tiny, but the same shape as the overall size? Or we could just be wild and wacky and claim that the new set size is like double resolution. Then at least it'll line up the pixels cleanly if we have them set up correctly, which is a whole other story, but still. And just a minute, 16. There we go. No, not 16400. Alrighty, so here's the thing. If I set resize limits on all of this stuff, and that works, and I'm using all this, but I'm also using a meter that is being drawn with a base size to it. If I have some weird sideways, like non-integer scaling factor, it's going to make it look funky. But if the meter is scaled to exactly 1, or exactly 0.5, or exactly 2, it's going to still look clean. It's not going to have as many visual glitches. And if I set it so that the resize limits are clamping it to a integer factor of what its original size was, then we have resize limits that make visual sense for the meter. That is a choice where I could sort of tie the user's hands and not let you resize it smaller than a certain amount or larger than a certain amount. But hey, guess what? If you chose those extremes, it would technically look nicer than it might otherwise look if you went part of the way there or too big or whatever. So let's start with just plain drawing it. And I still haven't done the bevels. These are supposed to be transparent colors. And what's more, I still have not drawn, and you know what, I could draw that using the gray, couldn't I? Although the way the bevels are being drawn at the moment means that it will draw the colors over actual data extending to the edges, regardless of how big the bevels are. So like it'll still show relevant information in the shadow area or in the highlight area. Not that you can see highlight across white, but you'd be able to see it across other stuff. And here's what we were talking about regarding, and we are still constrained according to, but now we have a minimum size. Let's scooch this way up here and see if we can drag it to maximum size. Not really, but sort of. Oh, well, we kind of have. I dragged it to the side, and the cutoff is, you can't really see it, but cutoff is now going off screen. It's resized it past what the window will contain. That's not expected. Ooh, a lot of this is not expected. What does it think it's doing? Oh, it's gone. It's gone crazy. Now we're resizing it and we're losing the whole thing. That's no good. What the actual... Okay, so let's resize this some. This has gone terribly wrong somehow. Interesting. So we gotta dial some of this back. Right now we're running into a situation where we can let's see if we can make it break even worse. Okay. So we've got this screen, right? But we're able to squinch it down to a, oh, now we have squinched it down to this size, and then it came off the screen and showed up over here. Wow. We got this little sucker freaking out big time. And then if we horizontally scale it, this part scales, but we've already lost the top control. Can't see that anymore. It's literally off screen. This is the kind of stuff where if I did it this way and it went wrong, it would be particularly challenging for me to deal with making it go right again. Not only that, I've now lost the resize corner too. See? The resize corner is being drawn over here somewhere on the far end of this, which is now being cropped off the edge. So we're running into some juice bugs big time. A bunch of this has to be dialed right back. It will not work the way I'm using it. And this might have more than a little to do with the aspect ratio stuff. So let's see. So get constrainer. No, let's not get constrainer. Let's not use that fixed aspect ratio. Maybe it was set resizable that did that, because I set it to resizable true again, but then I still had the constrainer. Now we've got resize limits. That should be able to make it so that it's still clamped to the limits. And then what do we have in here? Are we doing anything in here? Well, we can make line width, but that's not actually going to do anything that will confuse it in this way. This is probably still fine. I will observe that the we might not want this hairline because we have not yet installed the color gradient stuff I was talking about. Not only that, yeah, I'm a little concerned about a bunch of this stuff. It's certainly going to resist my efforts to make it constrained to, like, if I could inset that additional bevel, then it's no longer going to work for my big meter, but it'll work for a smaller meter designed to look like it's inside a physical object. Let's continue fooling with this. We've just made a couple of little changes. Notably, I took this constrainer out. We're still resizable, but we're not attempting to set a fixed aspect ratio. And let's see. Here's our paint. Here's a resized. Area reduce. Thus and so. That should make it behave normally again for some values of normally. I just did Command C, which is actually copy. I've been doing that. I don't know why. It's not the right thing to do. It's not hurting anything. But I'm hitting random keys which are not even doing anything, and that's perhaps not the most. It just goes to show you how discombobulating all this is. There. Those are bevels. This is all the right size. Now if we do this, everything kind of gets scaled together. We're still showing a resizer that's able to reformulate everything. We can move it until it is the smallest possible size. Can we move it until it is the largest possible size? Ah, okay. So here's what's happening here. We just replicated the same problem. We just replicated it where the window was yay big. I dragged it out wide until it was wider than it could actually represent, and so now it has begun drawing cutoff off the size of the screen. The question here is if I scooch it back over again and then resize it again, I made it like literally the whole size of the damn screen. There is actually a control that I can use for that, so I wonder whether... Yeah, there's a control that I can tell it literally be the size of the screen and then literally get smaller again. So, now that I've done this, I have in fact lost the ability to see these. But if I, oh, no. And it is not honoring the vertical size limit anymore. Now what's happening is I've got 2 controls instead of 3. So can I put in some kind of constraint having to do with what it does when... I mean, I could put a constraint that's just like reasonably normally sized screens. I could just have it be like, this is as big as you get. That's maybe not the worst idea. Because when I make it so, like, hey, you can make this be the size of the screen, it becomes unhappy. It doesn't like that too much. I do not know. Like, see this control? This is the window in which it is. Here's a closed window. This plus means zoom. Make it be, oh, you even have some extra things. When I do that, oh, and move it to the left side of the screen, up, it made it expand. And click it again, and now it is ginormous. You can barely see anything. It's just a blank slate. And now, the overall size is taller than the size of the window. And while we still have a constraint on how narrow you can make it, we no longer have a constraint on how tall you can make it. Let me scooch that down here where you can see it. And in fact, we can squinch it flat because the top edge that it thinks exists is off the top of this window size. So where could we call some of this information to recalculate that? We're doing set resizable here. I honestly shouldn't be feeling chilly this late in winter. It's already spring. Set resize limits. Set size. Here's paint. Get local bounds. Do I have another option? Like get local bounds. Is that in fact what I want? What else could there possibly be? Let's copy this just to make sure I can get it back. If this goes wrong, what other things could I get? Window handle, perhaps? A handle is a pointer to a pointer. That's what they used to say back in macOS days. Parent width, window handle. Underlying native window handle for this component. Okay, if I had that, what would I do? I would get what, though? Member reference base void is not a structure or union. Huh. I bet we can't do this. Let's look up what Juice has regarding get window handle. Or let's just jump to the definition. Oh. Okay, component get window handle returns a null pointer. Or get native handle. Huh. See, now I have ended up finding myself trying to debug a juice bug, which is just me pushing juice beyond what it can actually do. So get window handle, that should give me what that window actually is. Trouble is, I don't think it really is doing that. And it's returning a null pointer, or it's returning a something. And then the reference base void asterisk, it's not a structure or union, it needs to be a bounds thing. Can we extend on get local bounds? Does that continue onwards? Because that'll fix everything. But then reduce, translate, set bounds. I don't know if there's a reset. Constrained. Get position. Rectangles. Tell you what, let me fire up one of my stream audios. I'm going to scoot off and make myself one of my cups of espresso. It's getting on towards 11. And I'm going to throw another log on my fire because I'm not very satisfied with how that's doing. And let's see what we can... Let's just play Welcome to Free Luna. How about? This is my album on Bandcamp. Someday there may be others. This one was a jam, I'll tell that. It is a bop. this is very interesting because it's also a little bit like learning about learning. Like the way that I'm having to approach the new GUI code, it's kind of like learning about learning. It's like I'm exploring all these things, and bit by bit I'm building a construction of how all this works. And I feel that kind of similar to traumatic events, when you have a little chunk of information of some kind and it does not fit with everything else and doesn't make any sense in context, that stuff gets stuck and hurts you. And it's about finding the context for all of this. So my explorations are leading to where I have a kind of mental theory about how all this stuff comes together. But I gotta go about it the slow way to make it work. I'm back. I'm going to try to put another log on the fire. Okay. Now, if I've done that right, it's not going to fall over and startle me or do anything unorthodox. And just as the time runs out, and just as the track runs out. So where we left off, I was working with the resize stuff and finding that I could do constrained resizing, and that's fine. I can set maximum and minimum sizes, and that seems legit as well, but if the resizing goes to where Juice freaks out, it starts always drawing stuff improperly and not resetting its bounds. And so that's something I'd like to look into. I'd like to look into what this bounds issue it's running into is. So let's start by going back into other people having resize issues. Viewport class. So here's somebody having an issue. A bunch of these people are making apps. This is apparently a way of making a standalone app, and that's neat in its own right, but not really what I'm thinking about. Nice that you can, though. So that's not helpful. I think this might be a guy from Acoustica. Check that out. Yeah, similar issue to maximizing. These are the things that one runs into. You can have the OS fooling with your stuff, making it be strange. Here's a situation similarly to, it's possible to resize individually and overwrite. Yep, sure enough. That's happening on Twisted Wave as well. Yep. Huh. Okay, here's somebody who thought they found a solution to whatever is going on here. Somebody's overriding the resizable thing. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm interested in doing Juice's standard method of going about this. Nope. So resizing issue on VST3. That's fine. I'm not going to be able to test this in all the hosts either. And that is a somewhat worrying thing, but what are you going to do? It's free. Huh. Okay, so Studio One needs you to be able to have a width 384 or more. This is all the kind of stuff that people run into. Yeah, I don't think I have to make it be a given aspect ratio because it looks like people are running into that problem anyway. I'm interested in the maximum and minimum constraints and having those be an integer factor of what the base size of the thing is. That seems to be legit, but people are still having problems. Also, it's hilarious. This is Cubase. Cubase is by Steinberg. Steinberg made VST3. So it's like, it could be shenanigans. So juice, balance reset, maybe not that. It's not really off screen, but it's off window. Viewport. More issues is like, here's a bunch of stuff that I've already dealt with. And I'm not attempting to make this stuff work the way the person expects. And the reason nobody's answering it is because it's not actually easy. And the people who are responsible for coding Juice can't necessarily do those things the way they want because it's not actually easy. Especially if you're working on multiple different window resolutions all at the same time and stuff. It's like, yikes. Here's a stuck, huh? No answer. Oh, I wonder if I can do that. Can I drag the resizer off screen and then be completely boned and not able to do anything? Let's find out. Here's a interface. Off screen is going to be way this away. No. On the other hand, that was not using the corner resizer. This is the corner resizer. No, but close. And I still have my minimum. I can drag it so that the surrounding window controls are invisible. That's as close to off screen as I can get it. Okay, so if this was in fact the full size, I wouldn't be able to get access to that bottom corner. But I can scooch it over like this, and now I can see the bottom corner, and now I can resize it. And lastly, back over to this. This is a button in a twisted wave, giving me these options, and if I just only click it once, it will zoom the whole thing, and I'm pretty sure it's still going to break. This time it did not. Interesting. Well, it would be nice if it was actually not broken. That said, I don't feel as if I've actually done the work for solving this one. This is some of the work. Like I can adjust the positions of these controls, having it like this. If I hit this green button again, okay. The problem I was having has to do with the aspect ratio concerns. And I can pretty well tell what is making it happen, although I don't know what I could do to fix it if it wasn't being fixed by just refusing to let things be a fixed aspect. If I have it be a fixed aspect ratio, I can pretty much tell you what's going to happen. And that is as follows. If it's a fixed aspect ratio and yet I try to zoom it to the size of the screen, it zooms to unreasonably too large, honors the widest aspect ratio, and then tries to force the vertical size of it to be okay again by expanding the drawing of the plugin up off the screen again. And I can probably make that happen again by, let's see, get constrainer, set fixed aspect ratio. I keep wanting to get a Command C when I don't actually need to copy anything. For some reason, my brain just wants to hit that key combination, even when there's no reason to. And I should be able to reproduce the problem every time just by doing this. Here's my unusually large window. We can make it be too small. We can make it be quite large. But if we hit this green button, everything will break and we will lose that cutoff knob unless we don't. Ah, now we did. Boom. It did the thing. And then if I hit it again, that's actually giving me, see, this is now flowed to be the correct size. If I can just resize it like this using the side-to-side resizer, and then you can't see it, but hit the resize thumb, I've got the original behavior back. But if I make it be too large again, and then I hit the resize thumb from where this is sitting, it has now snapped to full height, but a constrained width relative to the correct aspect ratio, which has put some of the controls off screen, and it only gets worse from there. it made it become invisible, and then when it came back, it was down at the bottom of the screen for no reason. And now that it's resized itself in this way, I can no longer reach the thumb. Although I can if I just resize it. Or maybe I can't. Wouldn't that be funny? Let's see what we can do. This is now an unreasonably wide window, and I'm just going to keep trying to stretch it. And stretch it until I reach that corner. See this control? This was the color picker. And I keep making it wider and wider. Oh, I think I might have hit the limit. I think I had a limit of how wide I could make it, and now I'm just dragging it. And at no point can I actually get the thumb back. And if we take this unreasonably wide window, see, there's the middle. And keep stretching it over until we can see the close box. We've also got a big old bevel here. We never finished the work on the bevel because we got distracted by this. It should still work. Yep. If you could see what it was drawing, it would be drawing the right thing. Now if I hit the zoom button, it should zoom all of its proportions to the dimensions of the screen. And it has. But the resize button is still off screen. We don't actually have a vertical resize. Oh, hang on. The overall window has a resize button. This is not the juice one. This is part of Twisted Wave. And it is sending it information, but it's not the correct information because we're not clicking on the resize button in Juice because the resize button in Juice is now off the screen. So what I'd like to do is find some way of making it reset its internal bounds. We can use this again, but it stopped working. And this is not giving us the constrained aspect ratio. The ability to resize here is compelling it to not honor its own aspect ratio. And yeah, I can resize that, but I'll just lose more and more of these controls as we go. And the last time when I resized this to be in inverted size again, see we've still got a little hint of the minimum width, but minimum height is no longer visible. Ooh. But if we're not using the juice resize, this is now limited to a dot because this in this one, the control, this window as part of Twisted Wave is operating normally. And there we are making a larger window size again. I wonder if I can make it go smaller again. Oh, it's going to the last size it was at. So what we're looking for is some way of redefining what the window's actual dimensions are from what it thinks the window's actual dimensions are, because this is bad enough that it can make it impossible to resize because you can't reach the thumb. Not only that, oh no, wait. If you resize from the host, it is actually able to redraw it using different colors, although now I can't actually reach the color picker. I only have shades of red available to me. but it is being sent resize commands based on a control outside the juice window. And that is letting me call this redraw again, and the meter still works. Some of the controls will still work. Can't see cutoff anymore though. Let's resize it like this. There we go. Cutoff still works. You can see it going to different positions, and in fact it can't be rotated all the way around, but it can be drawn off screen because the bounds are wrong. The bounds in which this is supposed to be rendered are now broken because the one is wrong window resize. The top bounds of the window were now considered to be negative, and the right bounds are now beyond what the actual screen size is. So let's see what we can do to make some sense of that. Because we are calling resize. Like what's going on in here, plugin editor. Here's where that stuff is done. There's paint. And here's resized. Resized is being called, but get local bounds is broken. Juice reset local bounds? I also don't want to mess with this always on top stuff because the DAW should be able to do that. Huh. Panel 1 set bounds. Okay. Parents bounds. So let's see. So area get local bounds. And that is part of, what is that part of? Rectangle. And it is a component. So here's where we're breaking things. The question becomes, like plugin editor, the window that we're in is probably part of this. Paint, we're sending in Juice Graphics G, but we don't always keep recalling paint. That's not necessarily a thing. We'll leave that detail there. So, like, what else can we do? Where do you even talk about get window handle in Juice? Because back in the olden days, on the Mac when they were programming it in Pascal, not C, handles were pointers to pointers. And you dealt with stuff like that as just a part of managing the GUI of things. So component add to desktop. That's not what I want, but it is something that has to do with dealing with the host windows. And the host windows is kind of what's going on. Like I can make the window and then the dimensions of the juice scene inside this window is no longer linked to it if the aspect ratio is messed with it. Add to desktop, that's not what I'm actually going to want. I'm not sure a get window handle is going to be useful. I feel like maybe it's not. NSView is actually quite old. It's from a long time ago. Here's somebody else having a Windows style problem. 2021. So Logic is doing this kind of stuff. There's a reason why I've never allowed for GUIs. Is this kind of thing can get you a million different ways. And then people will complain about it and expect you to fix it when it's the host that's doing something wrong. But when you start getting into the GUIs, the stuff that can go wrong can get really complicated. So let's get back to the context of a window and its view. So people doing OpenGL and stuff. So here's an interesting question. Somebody would like to render the contents of a window to an image file. If you could do this with the problem that I'm having, it would presumably render the image as the full-size interface that's partly obscured and not off of the top of the screen. And I leave the last bit up to you for at least some challenge. Yeah, sometimes we have challenges with other things rather than needing to struggle with the so people paint G. So we have components. I think that's just an object. I think component is just like any kind of stuff, or a container for any kind of stuff. It's definitely not as in AU plugin. The component is just any kind of stuff. So if anybody has missed what I'm going on about, we've got a condition under which the Juice plugin does something crazy and I can't fix it once it breaks. And that's unfortunate. We've got a resizable window. If you click the resizable thumb, we can make it be a fixed aspect ratio. That said, there's also other ways of moving things, like for instance this other resize place that is not part of the Juice window. If you resize it using the resizable area in the host window, it can become all kinds of different things. We're actually still clamped to this width, but we have no restriction for how tiny we can make it vertically. And then if we hit this resize button up here, which is throwing a little thing, if we go to zoom, it will become the full size of the whole screen. Once it's done that, if we then click on not the overall window resizer, but the Juice resize thumbnail, boom. And it has then made it be the height of the screen, but only the width that fits into the aspect ratio. But in doing that, it is now broken. And the way we can resize it breaks the interface completely. Like, it'll still work, but I can no longer click on the top thing because it's off screen now. And the worse the situation you get into with this, the more unfixable it becomes. Like, we can resize it again, and you can kind of sort of see that overall one. But you can mess it up to the point where it is irredeemable. And what I'm currently looking at, because I suppose I might as well, of all the things that I'm trying to do today, this was not going to be one of them, but you can never tell what you're going to run into. I would like to figure out how to, and look, it's not even the right, this is no longer even an aspect ratio anymore because it's resizing the aspect ratio based on what it thinks the top of the window is, and it's not. It is clearly doing its aspect ratio calculation based on what it figures the top of the window really is, and it's not true. And so our enclosing window frame is making it impossible to reach all the parts of the plugin. Now, if I take away the aspect ratio calculation, it more or less fixes this, but not to the extent where if it does go wrong, I can make it come back. And we've also found that, for instance, doing things like resetting the color of it, even if I use the host to resize it, this is resizing the window without actually changing aspect ratio. It will repaint it and select, for instance, a new color. And now if I touch the thumb, boop, it has jumped to what it thinks is the correct aspect ratio, but it's not really true, because tell you what, that's not actually correct. And if I do this, again, make it extra wide, touch that. Now doing that actually brought back some of my cutoff, but this might have just made it, no, I guess not. So what we're trying to do here is resize this to where I can get all the controls back, which might not even be a thing. Yeah. Because see, I can resize it like this, but then if I make it smaller, I can see that top knob, but then it goes away. And I make it even smaller and all the knobs go away, and the meter goes away. And these are all supposed to be constrained within this window, but the window and the top of the view are no longer the same thing. So, hey Lost Crow. So everything has to do with how can we reset, and you can also not see the border. This red line is like a bevel that's supposed to be in the whole size of the screen, but that's no longer coinciding with what's going on in the enclosing window. Now a possibility, since I have this resizey thing going on, I see a vertical resize. So the question becomes, can I put it totally off screen and then use that to resize? Oh, that didn't do it, but this will. And that has just sort of reflashed it a little bit. But we've just lost more of it. Then again, pull it all the way down. And we're going to continue to use this little double arrow to stretch it up vertically and see whether I can get it to where I can see the bevel on the top of the screen that's supposed to be there. It'll be a red horizontal line, but it's not really working, is it? And then if I zoom it to full screen size, which is this big, and then do the same thing, I can't quite get it to show the line it's supposed to show. I've expanded it to unreasonable hugeness, but we're kind of failing real hard here. And there you have it. So this is me struggling with an aspect ratio issue, where I can tell it to be a constrained aspect ratio, but it can throw in this gotcha. And a lot of this stuff works kind of, sort of, but like as long as it's this screwed up, I need to find out what has gone wrong. So that's why we're doing a Google search for juice get context of a window and its view. However, I don't think that's actually helpful. How about juice window bounds wrong? Well, we got window resizing the plugin window. Well, I've already seen that one though. That's a purple. I've gone there. Child set bound in resize error. This is more recent. This is 2019. This is still doing a thing, so. Exception is not the problem I'm having. that's not going to work. This person is trying to do a thing which is not a good idea. Here's another fairly recent thing. Editor size too large due to OS display scale preferences. Recent. Now, I'm not doing that, but plugin editor size too large is a good description of what's happening. Boom. This person's having the same problem I'm having. I don't have an audio unit working. My audio units are not building. But for VST, the plugin window is prevented from being larger than display, but the internal contents of the plugin are scaled past the plugin window borders. That's exactly what's happening to me. Mind you, my display preferences are not anything unusual. I'm not scaling it. But it's still doing the thing. Yep, you can't access the corner to resize. Yep. Choose displays. Okay. So what I'm now wondering is, like, if I can get this information, how do I make it go back? That said, it is Jules responding. Or is it? No, it's not Jules responding. Oh, and that's not actually the correct way of doing it because you're supposed to do it like this. Let's have a quick gander. Yep. Huh. 11 years later, for newer developers, the new way to do it is like this. Okay, that sounds like a good idea to try to do the new way of doing it. Can we in fact do this? And if so, resized is where it might be a good idea to revise this. So we got screen. So here's the thing. Maybe we can override. Can we set local bounds? We're getting local bounds. So local bounds is the thing that it can be unreasonable. That said, there shouldn't be... Huh. Okay. Okay. Set bounds. Huh. Okay. That's code. So if I'm not mistaken, local bounds is what can end up being a negative number if the resize does the thing that it tries to do. We still have the fixed aspect ratio engaged. Area set bounds should, I say should, be how this stuff works. We're not actually using display screen for a damn thing anymore. We never started, but let's firstly, we can do that. Let's see what happens if we are doing this thing where we deny area Y, X is across, Y is down. If we refuse to let that become a negative number, what do we get? Do we get a transform where it's able to override its own stuff? Right? Because, again, this only happens when our little control here, we've got this transform, which can be this small or it can be this big. And then if we use the other transform, it reflows everything. And then if we return to the resize thing in the juice window, it forces it back to the aspect ratio that it wants. But then if we click the little green dot here, it goes to full screen, and then when we hit the resize in the corner of the screen, we get this. And when we get this, it's kind of doing this. Like we can rescale, but we're losing the top of the plugin now. And this is the problem I was concerned about. And I was trying to figure out whether resetting set bounds would give me back this. It looks like that's a nope. It looks like whatever going on with this, whether we use this or whether we use the aspect ratio, and you have to try to make it be screen size on a screen that's completely the wrong aspect ratio in order to get this bad behavior to happen. But once you get the bad behavior to happen, you can't get it back. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to call this resize in such a way that it's forcing this top part to be drawn within this window rather than being. Also, I think I see, well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I'm trying to figure out whether this faint line down this part is right or wrong. That's probably fine. But yeah, here's where we're trying to solve a juice problem. And we're trying to identify what's causing it to do this thing. Because under normal circumstances, if it hasn't broken yet, it's pretty resilient. This also means this. Our constraints for the smallest possible size, it's still going to refuse to scale down below whatever this size is. But it's not actually going to constrain the vertical size because the vertical clipping is now within, like it's checking the vertical clipping against where the top of the imaginary window inside here is. And that's no longer real information. What I wanted to do is check and see whether it was actually 0, but it's not. Or if it is, I'm doing it wrong. I just did if area get y is less than 0, but apparently area get y is not actually the question. So, well, I do have a screen here, so that's my overall display. I do not see anything about, okay, so display is a pointer. A pointer to screen. Okay. That might mean it wants this syntax. I don't know much about C++, but it did want that syntax. Look at that. If I do that, for whatever that, it's C++isms. Now I can refer to some stuff. Not that much, though. In fact, that's spectacularly unhelpful. So how about we just go from here rather than trying to make a variable? This is a statement that does nothing. But maybe there's within it stuff that can do something. So if we have just done get displays, what options do we have? Okay, get display for rect. Find display for point. What I really want is the window that this is inside. I don't actually care that much about the display, so maybe, well, but juice desktop, so maybe if there's a juice window. Okay, window utils, resizable window. It says S and M and T and C, but I don't honestly know what these mean. So resizable window, that creates one. Base class that refers to them. And window utils, helper functions. Let's see what's contained within the helper functions. Is enabled, so this is going to return booleans. We could delete the window this way. Don't want to, but we could. Is opaque, set enabled. So this is giving us access to some of our controls. The question is plugin editor. Do we have plugin editor here? We do. Look at that. Okay, so we are in plugin editor. but we can also refer to plugin editor from here. This is probably not getting us anywhere. But we do have bounds things going on. Oh, look, we can get, hey, we can get sort of conceptual. Okay, so we can't do that, can we? Can we do this? Probably not. We're basically talking nonsense now. But here's the thing. We're trying to find stuff to do around the fact that this is a window that is drawing its internal contents inappropriately. Because it's drawing its internal contents super wrong. There's opacity. There's resized again. Setting enabled. We've got an idle timer. We've got a bunch of controls. I'm now thinking about whether I can get, oh, hi there, get window handle. I think that just gives you a number. Oh, and we can't use the dot operator on a type. What if we start with this? Reference type plugin editor is a pointer. Did you mean to? Well, we can give it a try. Thank you for the suggestion. This doesn't mean I'm doing a sensible thing, but we can but try. There. So that's returning something. This may actually do a thing. We'll see. We'll also see whether it complains or not. So as such, auto means whatever this thing is, we make one of them. That could mean anything. It could be an int. It could be who knows what. We could find out pretty quickly, though. It will become upset if this is not correct. Ah, the R value is void pointer. Damn if I know what that's supposed to mean. But it's a pointer to something. And you can apparently make a variable that is a void pointer. So we put auto back, meaning it stops complaining. And then can we do anything with whatever the heck this is? Do you have any contents? No. Can we access anything from here? Doesn't look like it. Yeah. Telling it that it was an int had it correct me and go, oh, no, this is a void pointer. The problem is that's not actually useful. We're starting to see problems similar to the problems I'm facing. Internal contents of the plugin scaled past the plugin window borders. That's a good way of putting it. Let's do a little search on that, literally that. See if anybody else ever experiences it. Juice. Internal contents of the plugin are scaled past borders. And here's somebody else with VST problems. Jules in 2018 is battling ridiculously complex Windows scaling problems. Okay. Juice projects. See, this is why some of this stuff goes wrong, is because the projects have to be per monitored API aware, and we're able to keep forcing it to be things. Okay. Pretty sure the problem that's showing up here is not actually, yeah, getting ultra small editor windows. That's literally the opposite of what's happening. Again, the thing that's happening is I'm able to use the forcing to a aspect ratio in a way that breaks the positioning of the window. If I don't do an aspect ratio, everything will kind of reflow in a way that may or may not be desirable. Oh, hi. Here's the thing. So this is apparently a thing that can be done. Could this maybe override what's going wrong? I'm skeptical. Oh. Let's see whether it likes that at all.